So we moved to Monkseaton, and that was 51 years ago. And we lived there, and I have to say, we had some lovely times, but I decided I would get a part-time job, and I waited till my boys went to school, because most of the work that the Empress offered was evening work. They did give you usually 2 afternoons, but it was mainly part-time work. So I went, and I have to say it was a very nice interview, and it sounded good to me, because I could feel it was going to be a very busy job, so there would be no fear of you being bored. And that's exactly what happened. So I started there in 1968, and we worked on different jobs every day. You would go in and you would be on admission, get people in, and it was exciting, because in those days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday nights, it was the jackpot nights, where lots of bingo outlets around the country pooled their money together, and you know, the prizes was huge. So when you think you worked a week for about £4.50 a week, some of those prizes were hundreds of pounds. I think it was about £2,500 each night, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night jackpots. So what the Empress establishment had to do was they had to open the ballroom, which took a lot of people. Then you had the balcony upstairs, which again took a lot of people. Then we had an adjoining alleyway, which took in what we call the dome now. We called it the rotunda. And that was full, and it was also a ballroom in those days, smaller ballroom. And then they had the cafe, which looked right over the sea, right up to St Mary's Lighthouse. Beautiful view from there. So all these parts of the building were linked, and they were full of people. And it used to take 4 staff probably about 2 hours to get the people through before the game started. So it was a huge, huge thing, and it was buzzing. You know, they came in, everybody was full of fun, smiling, hello, how are you? And it wasn't like a job. Then after you got them all in, and the doors were closed and the session began, all the staff, there was lots of young people that had young families mainly, and I'll say there was young men who had a day job. They used to come in the evenings as well, just to make some extra money, and we all got positioned somewhere. And of course you had to be alert. If somebody got the line, you had to be able to pinpoint it, and the staff used to run, literally run all over till they got down to the compere, and they would read it over the microphone, and you give them the ticket, and they had to go at the interval to the pay end of the place and collect their winnings. So that went on. Then you would have the interval, and that wasn't idle either. We had to go get our trays of ice creams and drinks, and we satisfied all those people with drinks. We had a buffet where they could go and have supper, or they could have their tea if they hadn't got it earlier on. So there was buffets running upstairs, downstairs, coffees, teas, sandwiches, cakes, everything they could imagine. And then all the gambling tables would start. The one-armed bandits would open up in the interval, and then we had a card bingo table, which was like a half moon. And everybody had to put sixpence on a card. There was 3 cards. So you put sixpence on a card, and every person, I think it took 40 people at a time. And if you had a fast worker, they earned a lot of money for the house. So it was 3 cards, sixpence on each card, and then sixpence on the top. Now, the first one to get all 3 cards was the one that got paid out on. But it was very, very fast, and you had to be fast. And the other people that were playing on these one-armed bandits, they were allowed 10 pulls on a machine each. Otherwise, they would not get off to let anybody else have a turn. And then, of course, when the jackpots came, it just crashed, you can imagine, because it was all sixpences in those days. Well, can you imagine £50 or something coming out in sixpences? We used to have a little cash desk, and people used to come and buy £5 bags of sixpences just to feed these machines. So it was big. And then at the end of the evening, they would actually stay on, and the tables were opened again, and the one-armed bandits were opened until about 10 before we closed at night. So that was the bingo. But there was exciting times, because so many times a year all the tarpaulin would be rolled up off that beautiful dance floor in the Empress, because it's one of the best dance floors in the country, with all the springs. And when you're dancing on it, you could really feel the floor moving. Glorious for dancing. So we would have ballroom dancing, and these couples would come in. It was the very early stages of the ballroom dancing, what we've got now, come dancing. This was what went on in the different ballrooms, like would be here, they would have it at the Oxford Galleries, they would have it in different places in Newcastle. But when it came to the Empress, they would start with the children, and the children were very young, about 5 years old. The little boys were all dressed in their evening suits and their bow ties, and the little girls were miniature ladies, and they had their evening dresses on. And we had tables set out, and it was televised, and it went on to television, this. And Desmond Carrington, he used to be really like a film star. He was in it, what we watched as Emergency Ward 10 in those days. That was a programme on the television. And Desmond was a very handsome man, and he used to be the compere, and he would, so when the children were finished and their hairs were all combed up into beehives, and they had to sit still till the hair got perfect. So that was something in itself. These children were just step perfect. Beautiful to watch them dancing. Then on would come the adults, and they all had numbers on their backs, and Desmond would give an account of what they were wearing, the colours, the materials, and how many cups they'd won, how good they were, whether they were beginners and looking for stardom. And that went on, and that was a wonderful night, And they used to go on till 2 o'clock in the morning. But the Empress, they were a very good company to work for, because every one of the staff who didn't have a car or anything to get home, they were taken by taxi to their homes at that time in the morning. So that was the ballroom dancing. And again, the place was full to capacity. So there were really highlights these nights, The Empress in the Rotunda ballroom was used to its full use in the 60s, 70s. And then the next thing we would have was the Lord Mayor. They had the Lord Mayor's Ball. And the parks people used to come in, again, roll the tarpaulin up off the floor, and they would plan it. And they would have green turf around the edge of the Empress ballroom floor. And they would lift it up in stages, and all these beautiful flowers were in pots. So you would start with primroses, and then you would get your tulips and daffodils, and it went up till it was almost like a wall. Well, can you imagine walking in and the scent of the flowers, because there was no heating allowed. The heating had to be turned off. Nobody minded, because once the place got going with all the people, it warmed up anyhow. But it was to keep the flowers fresh, you know, no heating. And they would come in with all the Lord Mayor's regalia, all in evening dress again, all the dignitaries, chains around their necks, and they would lead onto the floor, and it was a wonderful evening of dancing. So, you know, I think you had to be a guest to get in there for the Lord Mayor's Ball. But you see, Whitley before Tyne and Weir, really had its heydays on its own. It did. People enjoyed this town, and I hope it'll do it again. You know, and because the ballroom's still there, even though they have bingo. And I'm not sure whether it's still got the tunnel to join up with the dome. Perhaps it has. But I just hope it could come back again, you know, and it employed all these young mothers who couldn't get childminding, and through the day there wasn't any childminding in those days, so it allowed them to go to work for a couple of hours in the afternoon and 2 or 3 hours at night, and that's how I got back into work. But I have to say, I made a lot of friends. And they were very kind to the staff, you know. They gave us little parties afterwards on certain nights. We would have parties just for Christmas, special occasions, you know. But yeah, it was exciting. It was a lovely time in my life.